Welcome to Bots and Beyond, your weekly dose of all things automation, mixing up end user, vendor, and consultant experience to create your go-to podcast for bot-related insights. I am your host, Wayne Butterfield.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Bots and Beyond, episode 14. This week, we're going to start discussing conversational AI and how it's so much more than just natural language processing. And I'm not ashamed to say I'm speaking with one of my favorite conversational AI technologies in OneReach. And it's great to welcome Robb Wilson, who, as I'm sure he will introduce himself shortly, is the CEO of OneReach. So it's great to have Robb on the show. Great to have you here. We've got a jam-packed list of topics to kind of discuss, and I know we're really going to chew the fat on everything surrounding conversational AI and why it's such a hot topic at the moment, why everybody should be interested in it, and obviously some of the great work that you guys are doing over at OneReach. But as much as I know who you are, it'd be fantastic if you can, as is usual with Bots and Beyond, introduce your who, what, and why.
Sure. Robb Wilson, founder of OneReach. Been working in conversational AI, so building bots since Yahoo Messenger was a popular hot thing. So I had a Yahoo Messenger bot that my now co-founder used to contact to find out where I was. Where's Robb? The bot would tell her. It would remember key things for me. And we're talking 15, 20 years ago. And I was like, oh my God, this thing's going to be huge real soon. And that's what's always funny, because sometimes people will say to me, wow, your timing is perfect. I'm like, no, you have no idea.
Brilliant. Well, I'm sure you don't do that just because you want to keep track of your colleagues. So where did the passion come from? What's your why around conversational AI?
I've always found myself right at the cross, the cross between UX and technology. So I'm a huge fan of technology. I tinker nonstop, but I'm even a bigger fan of the design and human experience side of it. And so fundamentally, what it always has meant to me is the moment in time that machines speak to humans in our language versus us always having to teach humans the language of the machine. And I was part of a debate in Oxford, many years ago, that talked about, is technology leaving people behind? And I think the consensus was generally yes, it is. But this is a game changer for that, because if you really think about language and how much it's a barrier for so many people, immigrants to new countries, etc. And you realize that, machines have a language, and to be, tech savvy is to really just have learned a number of those languages and be able to learn them quickly and easily. But if you drop that, it's sort of like a Neuralink event. I think even more important than Neuralink, because this is the moment that, we can interact with machines without learning that language and at a higher bandwidth. So I've always just been thrilled with the possibility of how it can really change lives.
Great. And that's so apt, the way you just described that. So I can't remember whether I told you, but I'm at my nan's house at the moment. And she's well into her 70s, her late 70s. And she sees me as this person who can help her, with technology, right? So it's so apt that technology and technology usage is a language in itself, and not everyone is well versed in it. What is completely natural for me, my wife, the kids, is just so alien to many others. I think it's definitely something that's very topical for me. So great. I mean, that's an amazing why. Thinking about some of the things that you said there, you spoke about technology and language. It kind of dawned on me around natural language processing, and that generally being the key component that everybody thinks of when they think kind of chatbots. The things that I've always had, incredible conversations with, you and the wider team has always been around the ecosystem of process and methodology, and as you say, UX and all of those things. I completely concur. So important. Building experiences using technology to help. Kind of talk to me a little bit about kind of your thought process around conversational AI, and what's it built up of? What are the things that are really important to you when you're thinking about overall experience in this kind of world of chatbots?
Yeah, I'd say the first thing is what you said, which is, defining what is a conversation, because for whatever reason, I think because NLU is new and it's novel, and people seem to be connecting with things like Alexa and Google as their mental model for what a conversational AI experience is. They think of it as purely language based, but when we talk about it, a conversation, it can contain many things: facial expressions, gestures, sounds, attenuation of your voice, slides, visual aids. All of that is really included in I had a conversation with this person about. And I would say the biggest damage that's done by limiting people's mental model to the words and the language itself is that the best you can achieve from an experience standpoint, in my opinion, is parity with talking to a human on the phone, and not even a great experience, just a basic experience. Because if you're just using language alone as the tool for creating the experience, then basically, if it understands everything like a human would, yeah, you might have parity with a basic human, not even a high bubbly, full of life personality, but just a basic human interaction. And so when you enter down this journey of a NLU only or language only experience, the best you can achieve is parity with an average experience. And as we know with AI, it has to, typically to really get traction, it has to be better than a human experience or better than the alternative human experience to really take off. And that problem is limited if you're just going with NLU. And when people hear me say better than, they often mistake that as like understands words better. And I don't mean that. I mean, like to me, an Alexa experience is slightly, I call it voice command, really. It's like the clapper, it's just, oh, wow, this is so much better than the clapper. But a real experience to me is more like Uber or a GPS experience. That's to me what demonstrates the power of a conversational experience with all of its elements.
And a lot of what you just said there really resonates with me, and not necessarily from a conversational AI perspective, but certainly in my earlier career, I was a real pioneer in digital messaging. And I was always convinced that the power of digital messaging was not in the conversation, but was in the fact that you weren't speaking to somebody on a phone, you were looking at a digital device. And so there's so much more that you can do when you're looking at something versus listening to something. You can use your eyes as a visual sensor for a start. So make use of that. And right. It sounds like we're absolutely both totally aligned on that.
It's higher bandwidth at the very base understanding. It's just a higher bandwidth interaction, more data.
Exactly. Now, one thing you did kind of touch upon there is you did speak about kind of intent recognition, and you're right. I think there's a lot of people who say our intent recognition is X times better than Y, and that's great, okay. But intent recognition is just the making sure that you understand the query that the customer has. Now, again, another one of the reasons why I'm really positive about your technology is this kind of NLP NLU bake-off. The use of multiple NLP engines to get the best answer. So although you've mentioned it's so much more than intent recognition, talk to me a little bit about kind of what you're doing just to even maximize that aspect.
Yeah, and I think this is probably a result of being in this so long. I realize that, or I believe that the NLU capabilities is, if not already commoditized, very close to it. With GPT-3, it kind of goes to show, everybody's going to have access to that, and you can sort of see that, getting a model to understand someone's intention, it's really at the point of who's training it at this point, and not what system are you using. Pre-trained models, accelerate the training process, and being able to access pre-trained models at whatever general level, whether it's domain specific or just pre-trained to understand certain semantic meanings. There's an advantage to that, advantage to moving quickly. And so our belief has always, and mine has always been, to just it's really with AI more broadly that general intelligence isn't going to happen because Google comes up with a single algorithm. It's going to happen as a perception, and that perception is going to be experienced through conversation, and it's going to be the amalgamation of many algorithms together, depending on the use case, that gives the impression of general intelligence or the perception of it. And so I've just always, from a philosophical standpoint, been very much pro open AI solutions, and saying that sequencing many AI solutions together, always being and adding new ones from all over the world, is going to be the fastest way to build the best experiences, not sort of building within the small narrow window of one provider's technology, a closed system, right?
Thinking about one provider solution versus another provider solution kind of brings me on to, I guess, a bit of definition, right? For those that are listening, the world of conversational AI, chatbots, virtual agents, there's so many different names. I mean, do you kind of have like a preference? Do you have kind of any insight on definitions of what may define a chatbot, what may be a virtual agent, what classes as a conversational AI specialist versus just an NLU engine? I mean, do you kind of have any advice for those that are looking to differentiate?
Yeah, that's a tough one. So being a UX person, I'm always going to take the meaning that's most commonly interpreted, not the one I want it to be. And to be understood is more important to me than to be right. And so, chatbots, have kind of really turned into what it seems like a basic Q&A experience. At least most people seem to be referring to a chatbot and thinking that's the mental model they have, is this back and forth question and answer, which, interestingly enough, in most of our testing, when asking customers which experience they preferred better, they prefer FAQ pages that give multiple results, more like a Google search, over an FAQ bot. So that's what I think most people think of when they think chatbot. And then once you get to the virtual agent and personal assistant, I see that as like you start this journey of a primitive interaction or a primitive simulation, of a human. And as it becomes more personalized and contextualized naturally, just if you evolve it, it's going to eventually become a personal assistant, no matter what you call it, and no matter how you think about it, because eventually it knows so much about you that the end user is going to perceive it as a personal assistant to themselves. So I think anybody that is introducing chatbots today is knowingly or unknowingly on a journey where that chatbot will eventually be perceived by the end user as a personal assistant because of its intimate knowledge of that person. The last conversation they had, the last thing they did, the next thing they want to do. So then the question I kind of get asked is, should you just start there or start at chatbot? And, I think the answer is that when a bot is primitive, act primitive. Otherwise, you'll disappoint.
Interesting. Well, I guess that's kind of leads me on to the next topic of discussion, really, which is when and where is the right sized opportunity. You kind of spoke about primitive chatbots, Q&A, FAQ. Do you know what? Having worked in customer service, there are a lot of simple-ish type queries, right? There's a lot of fulfillment type transactional queries, and then you kind of have this, these kind of higher level conversations that are certainly more nuanced, a lot more complex. If you were starting out now as an organization, where are the places that you think you should be looking to say, hey, do we have a need? And is there anything that in your mind you're still kind of reticent to say that's not something that we want to be tackling right now?
Yeah, this is a good one. So I feel pretty passionate about this and fairly sure about my approach on this one, just having seen it done the wrong way so many times. And I understand why it is this way, but companies tend to focus on building a business case because of the sophistication of the engineering folks that they have to bring to the table. And the best business case to build is something around cost savings with customer service. And so they build a typical business case will look like, we take this many phone calls, it costs us this amount of money. If we automate that, we'll save this amount of money. And that's why we should do this. And I think it's unfortunate that that's the way it is, because I believe that the best journey for a customer to take is to begin the conversational experience by automating conversations that they're having with employees first. Get their organization and culture familiar with conversation internally, practice on your employees, kind of build a sophistication there first, then move to agent assist bots, where you have bots that are assisting agents to helping customers do a better job. And then finally, your last stop, which is the most important person in this whole scenario, your customer. Once well practiced and well rehearsed and well understood, then you can start deploying on customers with a lot more experience. And all of those use cases that you created for agents will naturally move over to customers very well.
I can see how that flows. And then if you think about it from a customer's perspective, that sounds great, right? You've ironed out all the bugs. From a business perspective, I guess it's a lot more difficult to build that as a business case and to justify that kind of early investment. But I guess it's whether you have that short-term view or the long-term view, right? So the long-term view is this is going to deliver us much greater value when we have fine-tuned our capabilities. We've created a conversational culture and a kind of digital-first mindset in our employees. Then when we're assisting our client, our customers, our end customers, we've got this nailed. How long would you think a journey like that should be taking an organization? It doesn't sound like it's 3 months, end to end, and we're done and dusted. It sounds like it is a journey. What would you kind of view on the length of time that might take be if you're going to do it really well?
Yeah, I think every organization is going to be different. Their enthusiasm for it, the enthusiasm internally for it. What I see a lot of is customers or companies putting out bots that customers don't like, then pulling back, then rethinking, trying to, put more budget towards it, and still failing. And so I'm not sure it's going to take longer. I don't have evidence of that, but I have this suspicion that if you embrace it and you go with it, and there's so many employee use cases you can start building out, and then you go straight to agent assist, I think you could be there in 6 months. I think you could have your first customer use case in 6 months.
Brilliant. I mean, I'm just working with a client now, and their kind of pilot took them 10 months. So if you can really hone it and still get through those various different phases, then you're right. Maybe there is an opportunity to start internal and go external, and it not actually take any longer. So I think that's really interesting. Maybe something to dig into at the time. There's one more thing I want to talk about from a tech perspective. Again, one of the real reasons why I'm a big fan of OneReach is the kind of the native voice capability, right? So many of the chatbots, virtual agent capabilities out there are very text first, and yes, they can be used in a voice setting, but not necessarily with native capabilities. You guys are different. And I might be right even in thinking that you set out as a voice first, and obviously text is, I would probably class as slightly easier. So you tackle the difficult thing first and then work backwards. Is that kind of right? Can you give us a bit of insight into your thoughts around that?
Yeah, that's dead on. We're a problem-solving organization. Because we started before this was a thing, we had to just find real problems in the world to solve. And having been in UX for so long, I knew that my number one job when helping like FedEx or other large companies try to design out the user or customer experience digitally, that was one of the primary metric was, how many phone calls did we defer, and seeing that over and over again. And yet still not stopping the flow of phone calls, no matter how well designed it was, it led me to realize that, it's that idea that sometimes people just need a conversation to solve something. And so I really knew that if I was going to solve that problem, I had to go to where customers were, not where I wanted them to be. And they're on the phone. So I had to reach them on the phone and then ideally pivot them to other channels, or even better, omni-channel, keep them on the phone and introduce other channels, which is my favorite move. It's to not push them into one channel specifically, but use whatever channel, multiple channels at the same time, to help them complete what they're looking for.
One of the earlier episodes, we spoke about the kind of the impacts of COVID on, interestingly, the move towards digital and the acceleration. And I laughed with Richard, the guest, around what took us kind of 5 years to try and nudge customers into digital channels. COVID did in about 3 months. So have you seen any other impacts as a result of the kind of the pandemic? Anything of note from what you've seen?
I feel like it's kicked off a wave that we have, like we're just at the beginning of seeing the implications of what's, how it's kind of unlocked a new way of thinking about work. Going remote is one piece of it, but then the next piece of it is the workday, the 40-hour work week. Like everything's on the table at this point. For us specifically, it gave us more opportunity to have the employee first conversation. Conversational AI and bots are a great way to manage remote teams. They're a fantastic way to facilitate communication with remote teams. A lot of companies are concerned about productivity in the face of remote work, and conversational AI bots are great ways to measure productivity, to interact with people, to engage and keep them engaged when they're not in the office. So I think it's opened up that conversation a lot wider for us, where companies maybe don't need the save money ROI use case, but we can have the productivity conversation and say, how much is your employee productivity worth to you?
Interesting. I think that's the whole kind of employee impacts have definitely been kind of underplayed. It's always been about the experience that the customer's now receiving because employees are having to work in different ways versus, well, actually, what about the employees who are now having to work in very different ways in quite different environments, and where can technology assist them? So I think that's definitely a good way of looking at where else you can add value. Conscious of time, it's been a great conversation. I have another 50 questions that I could ask you. I think it's been a great experience to pick your brains and to understand a little bit more about OneReach and some of the thinking behind UX and why that is such an important factor in the design of any conversational AI delivery that you guys are involved in. That's something that has always resonated with me. It's definitely more than just understanding the intent. It's so much more, and I think we've kind of confirmed that throughout the conversation.
If I had one message, it's to think broader than words. It's that every AI experience or conversational experience, the goal should be to surpass what a human over the phone experience would be like, not to match it, but to make it better. And I think that's the unlocking point for this technology.
Well, I think with that, I might even change the name of the episode. And thank you for your time. Much appreciated.
Yeah, thank you.
Great. And thank you, everybody, for listening to Bots and Beyond this week. I look forward to speaking to you all next week, and have a great week. Thank you.